The Sherlock Holmes Advent Calendar. An Odyssey to Jerusalem. By Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Nora Godwin. Narrated by Bryan Godwin. Part 9. The Holy Family. We roamed through close alleys loosened up by a few squares in front of religious buildings, with the help of Salah's local knowledge. I noticed that there were some churches here, even though we were in the so-called Muslim quarter of town. "Say, Salah," I turned to our guide, "if this is the Muslim quarter of the old city, why are there Christian churches everywhere?" The Palestinian looked at me good-naturedly and said, "Should we tear them down to make it look unitary?" "You know, Dr. Watson, you can't take the four quarters thing so seriously. The sanctuaries and the historical places of the different denominations are spread over the entire city. Although the classification reflects to some extent the respective resident population, the reality is much more complex. In this district, you will of course find especially us Arabs, but also Turks, Kurds, and North Africans, Maghrebians. The Jewish quarter, there is a section with immigrants from the Baltics. One might almost call it a small ghetto. The Armenian quarter is also home to Syrian Alawites and Jews, while the Armenians as Christians also live in the Christian part. And there, not only the Arab Christians live, but also Greeks and Arameans, as well as some Europeans. Between the neighborhoods are the markets, where the different inhabitants of the area meet. The Temple Mount is uninhabited and important for all religions, although it is Muslim-dominated, while for Jews and Christians only a few ruins have remained. All this information made me none the wiser. Instead, I was even more confused. "How do you keep track of this mess?" I asked. But Salah began to laugh. "Keep track of it," he repeated. "Oh, don't make me laugh. I am happy when I know my way around my own house. By the way, we are here. That's where I live." We stood in front of a small but three-story house, painted white and finished with a flat roof. Our host opened a simple wooden door and asked us inside. In the vesting room, a staircase went upstairs, but we were led further into the back part. There was a larger room, apparently the living room, which in turn was connected by a small atrium. We followed Salah's invitation to take a seat around a low table on floor cushions. "Miriam," he shouted upwards, "our guests are here." Soon after, we heard slow steps from the stairs. Then a woman appeared in a wide white dress. The dark hair was largely covered with a veil. Like Salah, was not older than 30 years. In her hand she held a tray with a teapot and cups. Then she put them in front of us and filled them. "This is Miriam," Salah explained, "my wife." "Very pleased," I said, nodding, after gently thrusting Holmes into the ribs so that he would also rise briefly. "Welcome to Jerusalem," the lady replied in English. "I hope you had a pleasant trip." She then disappeared again, because children could be heard screaming from the upper floors while her husband sat down with us. "The two children are 6 and 8 years old," he said, "a boy and a girl." It was clear to me that we had just witnessed a strange pairing. "It may not be of my concern," I began, "but perhaps allow me to ask a question. Am I wrong in claiming that Miriam is a Hebrew name?" "My wife is Jewish," confirmed our Arab Muslim host. "I already know what you think. I must be crazy, and you may even be right." "Interdenominational marriages are certainly not allowed," Holmes suspected. "Didn't you get in trouble?" "Of course. We had to do without an official ceremony," Salah replied. "But a marriage certificate is just a piece of paper anyways. In Islam, even a kind of contract. More important is what is written in the heart. To make a long time short, both Muslim and Jewish friends were not thrilled, but you know that I work for the Ottoman government. In your British terminology, I would be a kind of police commissioner. I can afford the one or other mishap without being subject to complete social exclusion. Miriam and I walk our respective paths in faith, and they obviously bring us together. If it is God's will, the rabbi and the imam may resign themselves to it." I was deeply surprised and felt great respect for this relationship. However, one question was still on my tongue. "And what about the children?" Salah looked at me with a serious face and announced, "Our two children are baptized as Christians, of course." He waited a few seconds for my astonished mouth to close again, then he continued laughing. That was just a joke, Dr. Watson. They're a bit of both. One may find practicable wisdom in every religion, even if it may be well hidden in Christianity. But in reality, there is also a lot of intolerance, Holmes pointed out. The Palestinian nodded. Certainly, but we beat it with our own weapons. For Judaism, the origin of the mother is important. Islam, on the other hand, is more interested in who the father is. Do you see what that boils down to? And now come, I'll introduce you to my children. We rose and climbed the stairs, where we were led to a terrace. There, Miriam sat at a table with the children, who immediately jumped up when they saw us. First, they embraced their father, who had finally returned from Jaffa. Then they stood in front of Holmes and me. Vos silvera iobamos, the girl greeted us in Latin, and the boy added in French, Bienvenue à Jerusalem. Holmes responded to the expectant faces and replied, Gratias vobis ago, merci beaucoup. The children giggled happily and returned to the table. We joined them, and while Miriam was preparing a late dinner, we exchanged one or other Latin and French phrases, and I was certainly happy to also learn a few Arabic words from their girl. After dinner, the children were sent to bed by their mother. Salah, Holmes, and I stayed on the terrace. Our host now served us a Turkish aniseed brandy. This is a bottle of raki, gentlemen, he explained, putting it next to 3 glasses on a table. I expect it to be emptied, but today is your last carefree evening in Jerusalem. Starting tomorrow, it will be serious, tedious, and probably also unpleasant. He was probably right with this assessment, but I still had to ask. I thought the Prophet did not like it when Muslims drink alcohol. Salah made a frightened face and quickly looked around. Then he was relieved. It seems to me that the Prophet is not here at all. Again he laughed loudly and poured in the first 3 glasses. You have very friendly, smart, and docile children, Holmes said. Congratulations. Thank you, said the proud father and raised his glass. That's what they got from their mother. To your health, gentlemen. Fisi hatik. We did the same and added an English cheers and drank our glasses in one go like Salah. The drink reminded me a lot of Greek ouzo. That was probably something the Ottoman Empire preferred to keep to itself. Like ouzo, shouted our unconventional colleague as he slammed his empty glass onto the table to grab the bottle again. You were on a mission to Greece not so long ago, Mr. Holmes. Don't you want to tell us a little about it? Holmes rolled his eyes in an unusual way and said, You know, these are British state secrets. It would take more than just a bottle of raki to loosen my tongue in this regard. We also have other methods with the Palestinian police, Salah explained cryptically, but we want to put old Greece behind us. Not to embarrass you, as I heard it was unpleasant enough anyway. In part, I had the impression that not only we, but also the activities of the British Secret Service were like an open book to our strange colleague. And one thing was certain. The sick man of Europe was not to be underestimated. The authorities of the Sublime Porte were informed about many things that were not actually intended for them. Nevertheless, I had my doubts as to how Salah actually fit into the Ottoman system of rule and belief for which he worked, but whose rules were sometimes of minor importance to him. After the 4th round of raki, I decided to address him directly. You are a civil servant, even in the police service, I began. And yet I miss the unconditional submission to the system as we know it from England. Your London colleague Inspector Lestrade would be horrified. Salah looked at his glass and thought for a few seconds. Then he said, I've already explained to you that my loyalty is to the Sultan's government, but the Turks never understood Jerusalem. Different rules apply here, my rules, which I have to abide by. This is my city, and my job is to protect it and all its inhabitants. Jerusalem has been through enough in the past, in the last 3,000 years. Peace is needed now so that it has a future. Otherwise, everyone loses. At present, it is the Ottomans who guarantee peace. I owe it to my family, my children, to work for its security, because it is them who are important to me. But I work on my terms and with my methods. Constantinople is far away. Exactly 727 miles, Holmes interjected absent-mindedly, provided you could fly directly through the air like a bird. Our companion frowned and turned to me. I have the impression that your friend is a little drunk. He won't jump off the terrace and try to fly away, right? That would not end well because he would crash faster than Icarus. Not necessarily, Holmes replied. You probably haven't heard of Abou Kazim Abbas, Ibn Firnas, an Andalusian writer and scholar from the 9th century of our calendar, mind you. He flew from a hill near Cordoba with wings constructed by him from eagle feathers, turned a lap and landed again. Admittedly, he broke both legs, but Emayad Emir appointed him court poet. Probably more of a court jester, Salah replied amusedly, only to suddenly become serious. The Umayyad dynasty is history, gentlemen. One day, the Ottomans will also be history, sooner rather than later. Jerusalem will endure all times until the last day, the day of judgment. All people who have ever lived will then have to gather at the Temple Mount and be held accountable by Allah. Until then, however, it's up to people like us to ensure justice and peace. With these words, he shared the remaining raki into equal parts in our cups, which we raised again. For peace and justice, he proclaimed before we emptied the glasses one last time.